Paul Hitchens is the aquaculture specialist at Southern Illinois University. And he's going to talk to us about market trends.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys a little information on marketing trends to the food fish market, live market, and kind of what we've been doing here in Illinois. This first slide actually shows you the sales that we've done out of Illinois since 2005. And this is to the live market for food fish. It doesn't have any fingerlings in there added in from hatcheries or anything like that. This is just large food fish to the live market. So you can see since 2005, this is dollars in sales on the left, and of course this is the years. And if we see there's a good increase in the amount of sales coming out of Illinois. A few of those years they had little dips here and there, but it wasn't just from the demand wasn't there. It was because we ran out of fish. So we just didn't have enough fish to sustain the market. So the market is strong, and it, up until now, it's continuing to stay strong. All of our fish out of Illinois does go to the live market. We don't do any sales on ice or fillets, anything like that. It pretty much all goes to the live market. This gives you some of the species that we've either done in the past out of Illinois or ones we're doing now. The ones on the right, these are mainly species that are done out of the hatcheries for stocking. The ones on the left are what we've done to the market as far as for food fish. We've tried a lot of different things in Illinois, and I'll give you a brief history on what's actually worked and what hasn't really taken off. This is where our facilities are located. Some of these are hatcheries or indoor systems. This is past and present, but if you notice, the majority of our farms are located in the southern third of Illinois. So we've got a lot of water in southern Illinois. Ground's a little bit cheaper. We're not up here in the Corn Belt where they got that nice black dirt for growing corn. So it's kind of the advantage for the southern third of the United States for ground for raising fish. I'll give you some information how we actually got started. The kickstart on production of food fish in Illinois started out with channel catfish. That was back in late 90s, early 2000s, and everything was set up for channel catfish. We did have a processing plant, so most of the channel catfish that was produced out of Illinois was being processed at that point. A lot of these were done in cages because in southern Illinois we do have a lot of strip cuts, surface coal mine lakes, and the catfish were done in cages in these strip cuts. And you can see back in 2003 when I actually did come to southern Illinois, that's as far back as I can grab the data, but we had about 25 producers, and we were producing about 600,000 pounds of channel catfish. In 2004, the processing plant shut down, and you can see a big drop in what happened after that. No place to take your fish to be processed. By 2006, we only had a couple people still doing channel cat, and those were all going to the live market because there was no processing. But you see the price at 80 cents a pound. It just never was a very high price. By 2008, we only had one producer, producing a little small amount, but even today, the price for channel catfish is only about $1.25 to the live market. So there's just not a lot of interest in that. It's just hard to make money unless you're doing major volumes. Freshwater prawn. At one time, we had 50 producers. Not a lot of poundage. You just don't get a lot of pounds per acre on freshwater prawn. But these were also mainly sent to the packing plant when we had the processing plant going. So once that processing plant shut down in 2004, you see the big drop. So today there might be a couple out there doing some freshwater prawn, but just we're basically down to nobody. So we are looking for something that would work without processing. So one of the options was to go to either hybrid striped bass or maybe largemouth bass. This shows you rainbow trout. We did have a few producers try that. It was an off-season crop with freshwater prawn and never really caught much success, so never really caught on. We did have a few producers doing tilapia, and these were done in indoor systems, RAS systems. And at one point, we had up to 7 producers producing about 50,000 pounds of fish. But you can see the price there wasn't that good either. Back in 2005, it was about $1.80. It's only gone up. Today, I can only get $2.35 if I sell tilapia. But it's the problem with the price is there's a lot of people down south doing tilapia, and the buyers will drive down south and buy it cheaper. So there's kind of a top price you're going to get. Otherwise, they'll just go down south and buy it for around $1.80, $1.75. So they will pay more up in this area because it's closer, but that price is pretty solid around that $2.35 mark. Okay, hybrid striped bass. This was the easiest transition fish to do once the channel cat kind of failed when the processing plant shut down. So we had a lot of producers jump in. Around 2006, you can see we had 22 of them. The price was around $3 a pound, and at that point, we had about 250,000 pounds coming out of Illinois. So it really replaced the catfish, all going to the live market. We didn't need the processing plant, so it was a very good option, and it just kind of started evolving into a more high-dollar fish, to where the producers could make a little bit more money than on catfish. So you can see around 2015, the data, the price has really gone up, but the producers started going down. So did the production. And if you follow the next years from 2017 to 2020 that I put in there, the price has pretty much leveled. It's around $4.20 to $4.25. The poundage has stayed kind of the same, even though we've had less producers, mainly because the big guys have stayed in and some of the small guys have gone out. And it's mainly because of that price. Feeds go up, other costs go up, and the price is kind of leveled out. So you're not seeing a good increase to correspond to those prices increasing. This is a graph that I took the price we were getting on hybrid striped bass every year from 2005 and averaged it. So you can see from 2005, there was kind of a steady increase on the price until you get up to about 2013. In 2013, it pretty much stopped and flatlined from there on out. And it stayed that way until now. And I'll go into a little bit more why that happened in the next couple of slides. just a little information on overall hybrid striped bass production in the entire US. There's about 10 million pounds being produced. 80% of that goes to the ice market, and about 20% goes to live market sales, is where we are at in Illinois. The main difference between the two is the ice market is about $1 to $1.25 pound less per pound than the live market. So if you want to get that high dollar, you've got to target the live market sales. Okay, largemouth bass. You can see we had our first producers in 2005, and you can see the price was very high. It's nice, $465, $485. We produced about 87,000 pounds at that point. And then we had a huge jump up to 22 producers in 2009. And this was a few of the hybrid striped bass farmers did get out of that, went into largemouth. The prawn guys kind of went over into largemouth because the largemouth bass are not done in cages in Illinois. They're all done in ponds. So you can see there's a steady increase in price. It goes all the way up to last year I was getting $6.50 to $7 a pound. And it's pretty much steadily gone up in the last 7 years. Poundage is going up because we've got more producers into it. At one point in 2018, we had over 700,000 pounds of largemouth bass going to the live market out of Illinois. So strong market, good price, and a lot of people are interested in doing largemouth bass, and there's room for growth. The best thing that ever happened to the largemouth bass market was New York. In 2013, January, they deregulated the prohibition on largemouth bass live to New York from Foodfish Sales. So now they've allowed the sale of largemouth bass to the markets, and that really exploded the demand for largemouth bass when New York did that. This is the same graph I did for hybrid striped bass, but it's the average price that I sold fish for from 2005 to 2021. You'll see it's kind of the opposite of the hybrid striped bass. It was going up, tending up, but it wasn't a huge increase. And then you see 2013, that's where New York came in. When they deregulated the sale of the largemouth bass and opened it up, you see a jump of over $1.25 a pound. So there was a huge increase in 2013. It kind of went down a little bit, kind of like the stock market does, goes up, down, but then it stabilized. So you can see if you follow this curve, it's an upward trend and it's staying up. So you're talking at least over $6 a pound since 2018. If we compare those two graphs and look at the lines on largemouth bass versus hybrid striped bass, you'll see why the price of hybrid striped bass actually is leveled off. It was going up, largemouth was pretty steady. There's New York. As soon as they came in, the price of largemouth went up. They started using a lot more largemouth, less stripers, supply and demand. It just leveled off and flatlined hybrid striped bass as largemouth is still going up. I'll give you a few tips on the live market. Number one, if you're wanting to go to the live market, you need to discontinue the feed 3 to 4 days before you harvest. Same fish 2 to 3 days prior to live hauling for purging in the holding tank. And the main reason, I know you're taking the fish off of feed in the pond, so they're not getting feed, but since they are loose in the pond, they're picking up some aquatic insects to eat, maybe some fry or fingerlings that have spawned in that pond. So you really need to clean them out before you put them on the haul truck. You also need to know your regulations. Back in 2014, APHIS, which is federal, they lifted the VHS order that was issued in 2006 because they controlled all the states up until 2014, and they deregulated it down to the state level. So every state now has their own theory on testing for VHS, which viral hemorrhagic septicemia, if you're not familiar with that. But so if you're going to the live market, you have to have the fish tested for VHS, and every state's different. So you really need to know what state you're even driving through, even if you're not dropping fish off into that state, what their regulations are and what paperwork you need. And it's usually just as simple as a VHS test. But anyway, you do need to contact your state's DNR for the regulations on transport of live fish. And also, you know, it's on the USDA website and also the NCRAC website, which I've got listed there. So you can find that out, but you really have to know each state, that's regulations. So you're not getting in trouble crossing state lines, which is Lacey Act area. So you don't want to do anything against the law here. VHS screening, it's fairly simple, but it used to be on susceptible species only. Some states like Illinois require that you do non-susceptible species, which the difference is the susceptible ones are ones that were found to have VHS, so they want you to test those for sure. Some states require you do non-susceptible species like Illinois. If you're bringing tilapia into Illinois, you still have to have those tested for VHS. And you got to realize that that test does take 28 days to get the results back. So if you're planning on harvesting your fish, you better get these tests done at least a month in advance. A lot of my producers, I do their testing way long before that because it's just kind of to your advantage to kill smaller fish than ones that are ready for harvest at 1.5 pounds. Because the test is valid for a year, so it does last for an entire year. I'll give you a few advantages of live hauling. Number one, there's no processing. That's a biggie right there. So you don't have to worry about, you know, opening up the fish. There's no HACCP certifications involved. It's a lot easier. Truck comes to your farm, load the fish on the truck live. They give you a check and then they pull out. So it's a lot less hassle on that. You're getting paid per pound on the entire fish. So they're paying you for guts and all. It's probably the highest price you're going to get because they are paying for everything. And there's no waste. You don't have to worry about, you know, disposing of waste or anything like that. There's no competition from foreign imports. Regardless if, you know, China or Taiwan, we know that they are producing largemouth bass. They cannot compete with the live market. They might be able to bring them in fresh on ice. They can definitely do frozen fillets, but there is no competition on the live end of it. So the only competition we got is here in the United States itself. They also pick up directly from your farm, and they take large volumes of product on a weekly basis. So most of the trucks, the bigger ones, will pick up 8,000 to 10,000 pounds a week. So if you do have large volumes that you need to move, I mean, it's easy to move hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. Or if you've got a, smaller farm, you can use a smaller truck and go to different areas. There's a lot of either retailers or wholesalers out there. Most of them, of the wholesalers, do have their own transport vehicles of various sizes, so you can move your product off your farm pretty easily in the amounts that you want. And it is a short distance to the major markets, which gives us around Illinois and our surrounding states a competitive advantage to the southern states. I'll show you a little bit of that. If you look at that southern third of Illinois where we're situated, and the rest of the north central region, we're about dead center to all of these major cities to the market. And if you look at the big markets, which are Canada, New York, it's a lot shorter for them to come to Illinois or any of this region here than go all the way down to Arkansas or go down to Mississippi and pick up these fish. It's going to add on another day's, almost 8 hours at least of travel. And most of these wholesalers that are picking up fish from the farms, I mean, their bottom line is what they can do price per pound to make things as cheap as they can. So if they come to our region, it's an advantage. They may even pay a little bit more on the price to come to Illinois or the Midwest, as far as having to go all the way down to Mississippi, because they can get back faster. It's live fish on the truck, so they're going to offload them quicker. Everything saves them money to come to our area. My presentation was only supposed to be 20 minutes, and I think I've pretty much come close to that. But anyway, if you have any questions, I can try to answer those. I think I've got that screen off of there.
Thank you, Paul. Matt's going to take over and moderate the panel discussion. I'll just ask before he does that, that our speakers go ahead and turn your videos and microphones on. Matt, the floor is yours.
Sure, no problem. Thanks a lot, Amy, and great job by the speakers. Appreciate y'all today. I did put in the chat, make sure that if you have any questions, you can either add in the chat there, or if you have the ability to raise your hand down in the bottom right, there is a reaction section. You can raise your hand so that we're not talking over anybody. I'll wait just a second to see if anyone wants to go ahead and chime in. If not, I certainly have plenty of questions for everybody. All right, hearing none, again, down in the bottom right, make sure you either raise your hand, unmute yourself, whatever, and we'll make sure that your question gets answered by the folks who are here. And I guess I'll ask maybe Jim, either Jim or especially with Paul working with the markets, where do we see the future? We look at the census and we see exactly what's going on in Paul's state, but where y'all see, we talked about Florida opening up for the food fish market. Anyone want to chat about where they see poundage wise, hatchery wise, any of those types of things?
I defer to Paul. He's closer to the market end of it. So.
Well, I mean, the market's been strong and continues to be strong. The only worry I got is if North Carolina, which they do a lot of the stripers to the live market, I know they're starting to go into largemouth bass. So if they get involved, it's going to be a lot closer for the New York group to start buying from North Carolina. So that's probably going to hurt us. That news we got from Jim about Florida, I think that's a positive thing. I believe that demand is going to crank things up. So other than North Carolina, throwing a little bit of a curve on us, there's a lot of demand out there. I've thought for years that it's going to slow down, and it never does. So I can't give you a a year of where I think it's going to stop, but so far it hasn't at all. So, and the price shows that. Price just keeps going up.
Yeah. And on that Florida, I'm not sure whether they're allowing fish in or whether they just open Florida producers to selling into Florida markets. And there's that's clarification that I need to read a little deeper into. I think Angela may have sent me that the other day, but it may be that they're only buying within state fish, but I'm not sure. But they did redefine the fish as a food fish that could be sold as a food fish.
And all of these buyers, I mean, they buy 52 weeks out of the year. We've got a little bit of advantage in our area to where we can get fish out, during the warmer months when they can really have a lot more trouble for the southern states because it's hotter down there. So, I mean, we can sell them year round, and you get a higher price in the summer. So you can kind of target that market. And, if it starts getting a little saturated and you can go to that hotter months market, you can move a lot of fish also. So there's certain things you can do to kind of make up for if the market starts getting flooded, but I don't see it happening. That price just tells everything.
Yeah. Like I said, as long as that price is staying strong, that means there's more demand than supply largely. So.
Thanks, Paul. I do have a couple questions here, one written and one down, but I do want to ask, what do y'all's water temperatures get? I mean, you're still pretty far south. What do they get in the summertime, and you're still pulling them out and moving them to the markets?
We get up into the 80s, upper 80s, and the main thing about getting them out in the summer is be gentle with them, high oxygen. You got to keep that oxygen almost, way over saturation in your hull tank. Get them in the holding tank, oxygen saturators, keep that oxygen at least 15, and salt. If you can do that, you can move them in the summer.
Thanks. All right. I appreciate that. Just a curiosity for myself. I've got Angela in the chat, and then Mike had his hand raised. So Angela asked, we heard a lot from several folks talking about diet formulations and changing the diets, and we heard about reducing fish meal. And Angela brought this up earlier regarding palatability. Anyone follow up with palatability on the animal, or followed through with kind of taste tests and how palatable that these changed diets are? And Angela turned her microphone on and video on, so you're welcome to follow up there if you need.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I just found years ago that there were a lot of studies being done with low fish meal or no fish meal, and the chefs really didn't like it when it hit the plate. So I just really wanted to bring that up as a concern, more of a, get the whole package together so we can continue to sell them at a good high price and not minimize or water down the value because it loses its flavor or texture.
Well, I think it can, but the diets you're referring to are almost no fish meal.
Right.
And really most of the taste comes from the oil. So you could probably take the fish meal down and slug it with a little fish oil and make up for the difference right there. So, again, we need some scale to the research effort where we pull in food scientists to work with us. We've done a lot of that at KSU, and in a bigger university, you would pass those fish on. You'd have the economists working with you. You'd have a food scientist working with you, and you'd follow them all the way from the egg to the plate. Small university. We didn't have anybody to pass them on to look at some of those things. So we've done a little bit on our own, but that circles back to what I was saying, where, if you're in Mississippi and you want to look at catfish, you can go from the fry to the feed to the food scientist to the geneticist to the, and if we want to develop this fish and be able to look at all those variables, you got to have a focused, concentrated, supported effort to do that. So.
Right. And even a research project that could be just a finished diet. You know, maybe just getting that last oomph in the last month of growth or whatever.
Yeah, you could load them probably with fish oil in 3 weeks. It would
Right.
make them too damn fishy, probably, if you wanted them to. And it varies by market. You know, some people don't want their fish fishy, and some people do. You know. So.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks for that, Angela. Appreciate it. Mike, you did lower your hand, but if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, feel free to go ahead and ask your question. I'll go ahead and ask it since this video is off. This question's for Paul. It's obviously going to depend on who you're buying it from, but you guys want to give us a ballpark on feed price right now, either in super sacks, individual bags, truckloads, however you're buying it.
Most of our producers buy it by the sack, and it varies from each manufacturer, but just an average, I would say a normal largemouth bass grow out diet is probably around $33 to $34 a bag. Food conversions are usually pretty good on largemouth because they're out in the pond and they're getting other things. Usually it's way under 2. It might be 1.5 to 1.8 food conversion. So that's also a plus, for largemouth versus our hybrid striped bass here in Illinois. Their cages, they don't get any extra. What you give them is what they're eating. Though that usually runs around 2 food conversion. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Paul.
We've got a couple more minutes. Certainly feel free to raise your hand. We know we got some more largemouth bass producers in the room, or of course I can ask questions myself. All right, here are none. I'll ask one other, I guess maybe for Paul as well. So we just talked about everyone gets their feed train fingerlings from Arkansas. We know just how expensive it is to buy fingerlings, and we heard that a little bit from Tidwell's presentation referencing Carol's section in the Largemouth Bass Aquaculture book. What about something for a smaller hatchery up here in the Midwest? Maybe it's in Southern Illinois to try to take care of some of these folks. We know it's expensive. We know they spawn later. We know there's a lot of difficulties there, but we also know how hard right now it is just to get feed train fingerlings.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good option. It's all our eggs are in one basket, coming out of Arkansas. We do have some hatcheries here in Illinois that do produce largemouth bass, but a lot of our hatcheries help out IDNR for their stocking. So there's not a lot of fingerlings available for producers. So that's one of the concerns for future is, are we going to have enough fingerlings? One thing is lately, the last 2-3 years, the survivals haven't been as good. I think if we focus on trying to get that survival up to where, even though we don't have enough hatcheries, but if you get better survival, then you're going to be using a lot less fingerlings. So if we could just try to fix that problem for an immediate thing, I believe that would help a lot.
Okay, thanks on that. Appreciate it. Leland, you put this twice down in the comments. You want to unmute yourself and kind of follow up what you're chatting about there?
Just my question was where do we see the demand for the excelled fingerlings? Something larger than the standard 4-inch that we get from down south.
Want me to take that one again?
Yeah, I don't know who wants to do it, but you're talking about what's the demand there for these advanced fingerlings, something not quite food size, but as a bigger size, correct, Leland?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking at kind of some advanced stockers for pond and lake management companies. Those, it sounds kind of more like what that would likely be, because obviously the more expensive, the bigger these advanced fingerlings are, the much more expensive they become.
Yeah, something under 8, but probably over 6, you know, that 6 to 8 inch, something that's a little more advanced that you could get done in a year.
Yeah, I'll let Paul or whoever chime in, but that's going to drive the costs up for those who are buying them. If an Illinois largemouth bass producers wanting to buy them, yeah, they can get them to food size, but they're also paying someone to grow them up to that size, and it becomes considerably more expensive. Someone who wanted to grow that up, my own personal opinion on what I see in Ohio, there's folks in Ohio who will buy them all day long for the Pond and Lake Management Company because people are impatient and they don't want to wait to catch their catchable fish. They want to catch them now. And so even though we're only talking really about food fish there, I would see a considerable market for advanced largemouth bass, because what's coming out of Arkansas are generally going to be your smaller ones. Paul, you want to add anything to that about any largemouth bass producers?
Yeah, I mean,
big
you're
ones.
gonna pay by the inch, so it just gets the bigger it is, the more you're gonna cost. The cost is gonna be. We've noticed here in Illinois, a 4 to 5 inch works almost as good as a 6 to 8, and you know, the cost is a lot lower. If you start getting anything under that, your survivals can be all over the board. If you start, you know, doing a 1 to 2 inch or a 2 to 3 inch, you don't know what's going to happen in the end, and it's hard to, you know, keep your production consistent and do the economics on it when you're up in the air on, well, maybe this or maybe that's going to come out. So anything over you know, 4 to 5 inch is good. Most of the time we can get those out almost in a year. If not, it would be the following spring. So they almost grow just as fast as a 6 to 8 does when it boils down to it. So there's not much that difference, and you're going to get them out quicker. You're just going to pay more for that bigger fish.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.